Hi, this is an interesting point here from Vote Labour Harry Leslie Smith. Considering that these unredacted documents outlining the sale of the NHS to American interests was available to political journalists since October, we can only conclude that the jobs of high-profile journalists are suppressing the news and smearing Corbyn. And actually we can, because let's face it, after Corbyn this morning, well, it was yesterday morning now, stood there and exposed the 500-page documents detailing conditions for selling off our NHS, as well as a host of other British public services. And the only response he got from the mainstream TV broadcast news media, which was ITV, BBC and Sky were the main ones, was questions about Corbyn's anti-Semitism. Now, since we've got absolutely no evidence whatsoever to support the idea that Jeremy Corbyn is in any way anti-Semitic, or even that he tolerates anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, then why are professional, trusted, established journalists asking any such questions of the prime candidate for Britain's next Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn, about these unproven, actually false accusations, instead of focusing on what he was revealing about the NHS? Obviously, they've already read that whole 500-page document. They're not interested in it. The only thing that they were interested in was hounding Corbyn about anti-Semitism. That's the only thing they were interested in. They weren't interested in the risk that British people are going to be subject to the same price hikes in medicines as Americans are now subject to the extent that people are dying because they can't afford the insulin. And that's people who have health insurance. Please understand that. People who have health insurance cannot afford the insulin. And it's not just insulin. We're talking about every kind of medical drug and treatment. It's very serious. We're talking about people's lives. The difference between life and death. We're talking about a risk of against British citizens' lives. And that includes Jewish British citizens' lives. Okay? Because these kind of attacks on our health service, economic attacks that do kill people, economic terrorism under the title of austerity, has murdered 130,000 British people. Sorry to keep mentioning it. Sorry if it's getting boring. I'm sure it's not boring for the families of those people who will go through yet another Christmas without their loved one. The people who've had to bury their dead. Okay? Already. Because of the cuts to the NHS. Now, this is absolute evidence, then, that the mainstream media are not a free press. They are a corporate propaganda machine. So, democracy is broken because one of the fundamental features of a democracy is a free press. A press that is there to abide by public in the interest of public interest. You see, these are the codes of conduct. Now, I, for one, know for a fact that our news media is not following these at all, except maybe when it comes to taking photographs of children. That's about the only thing that I could say that they are upholding right now. Because I know for a fact that this country, Britain, has failed children, and in particular children suffering from organised child abuse, organised child sexual abuse. And the newspapers have failed to report on the severe miscarriages of justice that have left countless very vulnerable children at a serious level of risk and harm, even death. And we have held them up on it. We issued a formal complaint to IPSO and quoted all of these. And apart from this one, every single one of these other points, we prove with evidence that they had broken all of these principles. All of them had been ignored, all of these principles ignored in the interest of protecting lawful suspects. And, you know, we've seen it time and time again through historical reports of child abuse, time and again. And we held them up to it, including all of the historical coverage. And they refused, IPSO refused to uphold our complaint. And I knew then, and this was a few years ago now, I knew then that this country is being governed by the very worst kind of criminals. We are talking sadism, sadists. Sadists that will happily murder 130,000 people and more through economic terrorism, will force Britain through a hard Brexit, will commandeer rigged elections, will lie to Parliament, lie to the Queen, will do everything it can to demolish our democracy and strip away all of the rights the people of post-World War II Britain had established. Finally, after centuries of oppression. And this is absolute evidence of it, because the media knew. The media knew exactly what they were doing. People like myself who do my own research, I was fully aware. I didn't need to see this document. I knew exactly what the Tories are planning with Trump America. Because I don't like to say America, because that includes, all of the American citizens that themselves are victims and are struggling against this same far-right fascism as is now standing at the door of Britain, waiting to take full control. And I feel sorry for the people that still believe the media garbage about Corbyn, who still believe, we need to just get Brexit done. I feel sorry for them, because the majority of those people are going to suffer exactly the same as everybody is going to suffer if these fascists do manage to get in. I mean, we are talking 50 years of austerity on steroids. So, the austerity we've already suffered, that is nothing compared to the austerity to come. Absolutely nothing. And we are talking about martial law, and very likely an end to any other general election being held in Britain for a very, very, very long time. Because they do want Britain to become a tax haven. Tax havens don't have general elections. Jersey has never had a general election. It's separate from the United Kingdom. It's a tax haven. It's never had a general election. Tax havens don't do general elections. Everybody will suffer. People will die. That's the fact of it. That's why this election is unlike any other election that the British people have ever participated in. Because we're talking about an election that will literally determine whether or not millions of people will live in poverty or outside of poverty. Whether hundreds of thousands of us will actually survive the first 10 years of Tory rule. Because we are talking, like I say, an indefinite time scale. Because as soon as the Tories get in, the first thing they will be doing is going for their hard Brexit, and they will be implementing martial law. That is what will happen. That is why, forget your tactical vote of voting Green or Lib Dem. Because it doesn't matter. All you're doing is watering down the vote. Because in a constituency where this many thousand have voted Green and this many thousand have tactically voted Lib Dem and this many thousand have voted Labour, the Tory vote could very easily get a majority because the opposition is so watered down. Don't you understand why the tactical vote is not the answer? That the tactical vote serves Boris Johnson when it comes to voting against the Tories. If you don't want the Tories in, there's only one answer. You vote Labour. That's it. You don't vote for anybody else. Do not listen to the polls. Do not look at previous elections because, like I say, this is an election like no other election. This is not the time for tactical voting. This is the time to stand with those who stand with you. And I ask anybody, how can you, in all conscience, vote for Lib Dems because you don't want the Tories to get in? How can you vote for Lib Dems when you know damn well that they have been complicit in Tory crimes? They're crimes against humanity. What has been done to the British people is a crime against humanity. Now, anybody who thinks it can be justified because the people are poor, mostly the people who've died through economic murder of austerity, because they're poor, because they're sick, disabled, on benefits maybe, because they're a low-wage worker. A lot of the people who died are NHS staff who've been driven to suicide in their hundreds, doctors and nurses. Now, how can you vote for anybody who has been complicit in supporting a party that has delivered that? A woman who supports Margaret Thatcher, Jo Swinson. Margaret Thatcher is her hero. She wants to build a monument to Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher was a criminal. She covered up for top Westminster paedophiles. Knowingly, she covered up for them. Organised crimes against children. She protected them. She was involved in the manufacture of illegal nuclear weapons and sale of illegal nuclear weapons in apartheid South Africa. According to the evidence, it needs investigating. You need to understand what is going on here. The reality and seriousness of it, people. This is not an election like any other before. We are talking, literally, what they're about to roll out in Britain is corporate communism. That's what it is. Look at Soviet communism, where the state controlled everything, except This isn't going to be the state controlling everything. This is going to be the global corporations, which are in turn all controlled by the World Bank. Which is, let's face it, a Zionist affair. We are talking about the children's future, and we are the last living line of defence. And in that sense, voting Labour, it's not voting for a political party, it's voting for our human rights. And you don't trust anybody that's lied to you, that's committed crimes against you, that has robbed you and deceived you, and killed your fellow citizens in order to maintain a system of profit for already ridiculously wealthy people, that has imposed a Brexit that is specifically to protect the ridiculously wealthy people's tax breaks and tax havens, and also to continue to grant them immunity from prosecution for all their criminal business activities, which does include their fraudulent money laundering companies that are set up in their hundreds of thousands in Britain. London is child abuse capital of the world. That's London already. Imagine what it's going to be like after Brexit. Poverty delivers children for abuse. Understand that. Any party that's inflicting poverty is delivering children up for abuse. Vulnerable. They're making children vulnerable and at risk of abuse. That's what poverty does. So anybody who is not voting for Labour now, as I say, this is no longer Labour as a political party. We're talking about humanity. We're talking about our planet. We're talking about our rights. That's what this vote, this election is about. It's not about anti-Semitism. It's about reality. And all these news medias now who continue to peddle that trope, because that's what it is, an anti-Semitic trope. Because it's anti-Semitic against Jews that stand with Labour. According to Trump, Jews that stand with human beings, that stand with Labour, with democratic socio-capitalism, they're traitors, apparently. They're traitors. They should all be far-right extremists. They should all be supporting the continued crimes against the people of Palestine. And if they're not, they're traitors. This is the narrative that's coming at us right now. People who have to rely on lies, slurs and slanders and libel. Who resort to dirty tricks. And that's a dirty trick. Ignoring documents that are in the public interest. Why were these documents not published? Why was it down to Jeremy Corbyn to hold a press conference in order to expose, outline what was in these documents, when the press already had them, and we're supposed to have a free press? It is time for some serious changes to happen in Britain, and they are going to happen. But it's going to be a very hard fight. We are literally going to be on the same level now as the people of Bolivia are facing a coup, a military coup. If these lot have their way, the Tories, if by their shenanigans and schemes, they do somehow manage to get back into number 10 after December the 12th. It spells doom for Britain, and it spells doom for the rest of the world. It spells doom for our children's future. And a lot of people will not know the reality of it until you see the soldiers on your street, the armed police. Until you are queuing up to buy your extortionately priced rations. When you can't afford your medicines. You will know, and it will be too late then.